Florida, invented in 1513 by Spanish explorer Tremar Ponce de Dillard when he and his buys landed in South Florida. At risk of losing his official explorer badge after months of being unable to travel north due to the difficulties of traversing through a huge swamp full of grass, ass water, and alligators, Tremar caught a lucky break when he made contact with the Cayusa tribe, the indigenous people of the land. They give to Tremar a traditional device they use to traverse the giant river of grass with great efficiency, an airboat. Due to his great skill in piloting these vehicles, Tremar was given the nickname Yanet del Flojo and established a Spanish colony which shared that name with him. Then a few years later, the English came around, translated that name, dropped a letter, added some ebonics, and boom, Florida. In its history, Florida went from a land of natural wonders living in harmony with humanity to an ignored Spanish territory due to its lack of gold and shortage of willing involuntary laborers, to an ignored part of British America, and then back again to Spain, who continued to ignore it. Eventually, it got some attention after the Louisiana Purchase, when the USA asked France to throw in Florida as part of the deal. Despite the fact that the territory was literally not owned by them, France was like, alright, whatever. And the USA just sort of took it, and Spain still to this day has not noticed that they don't own Florida anymore. Now, after centuries of being ignored, Florida's like an attention-deprived child acting out to get anyone to look at them. And despite their best efforts, the rest of the US can't help but look in amazement and disgust, sometimes wishing they could go back to the days of simply ignoring America's unwashed phallus. Today, Florida is home to a wide variety of people, found all the way from its gator-infested wetlands to its capital city Miami, or Tampa, or Jacksonville. Orlando? Maybe Panama City. I don't know. It's one of these. My point is, you got a lot of different people from different cultures all across the state. You got racist white people, young black rappers, Cuban immigrants, old white people, a few indigenous people who managed to sneak their way back in after the Indian Removal Act, and even a small enclave of weebs. Each of these groups has their own reasons for being here. The old white people came for the same reason old Flowrider showed up in the first place. They're searching for the fountain of youth. While they never found a literal fountain, every March there's a large influx of young drunk people in Florida. And every year, thousands of these youth disappear due to the elderly kidnapping and siphoning out all their blood in order to drink it in order to regain their own youth. Many young black rappers come up in South Florida within its underground hip-hop scene built single-handedly by Space Ghost Perp, attempting to follow in the footsteps of fellow South Florida rappers Denzel Curry, Kodak Black, Puya, Ski Mask, and Lil Ugly Mane, among many others. The indigenous people currently living in Florida are there because that's their home. Or at least it was before they were forcibly persuaded to move west of the Mississippi. The racist white people are there because Florida is apparently a hub of the NASCAR world, and for some reason stock cars driving in a circle just attracts people who hate melanin, like racist moths to a very boring flame. A small collection of weebs have holed themselves up in a compound known as Murakami, pretending that they're living in Japan. Operating under conditions similar to Sengoku-era Japan, living in near isolation from the rest of the world, no non-weebs are allowed to enter, and any weebs currently living in Murakami are not permitted to leave. From the few pictures that have surfaced from within the compound, it actually looks pretty accurate to real Japan. They have bonsai trees and rock gardens, some classic silver ratio buildings, those red arches. They even have those bamboo things that fill up with water, and then when they get too full, they tip over and pour the water out and go and the yearly hurricanes make as a nice substitute for Japan's tsunamis. South Florida has quite a substantial Cuban population. During the drug-fueled decades of the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of product moving through Florida, and a few Cuban businessmen decided to settle down there. And for the more regular, law-abiding Cubans, Florida's just a hop, skip, and a jump away. So if you're gonna leave the country, you might as well not go too far away. Florida's economy is based entirely around drug trafficking and tourism. These economic foundations of the state shaped its geographical foundations as well. You can't go 10 kilometers without running into a new amusement park. Disney World, Universal Studios, Orca Prison, Roblox World, the thing those old people are really struggling to find, that place where they reenact the Pompeii explosion, that place where you can go and pay $50 and they'll actually for real crucify you. While you have all these wonderful experiences for the kids, you have to give the adults something to do as well, which brings us back to the Florida drug trade. In order to ease the movement of cocaine and opiates traveling from South America through Cuba and into South Florida, multiple drug lords started a cooperative project to construct a series of islands that would connect Cuba to Florida, leading to the creation of the Florida Keys.
That's how mafia works?
Rather than try and combat the cartels directly, the DEA teamed up with the Department of Agriculture to slow down the flow of drugs moving into the country. They did this by instigating incredible growth into the Great Florida Reef, causing it to push the Florida Keys into its now iconic curved formation away from Cuba. In case you're wondering how exactly the DOA got the Florida Reef to grow so much so quickly, there's something you need to understand about wildlife in Florida. Like most things in Florida, the wildlife there is not normal. You've got roaming gangs of alligators riding ATVs, a group of monkey researchers in Silver Spring State Park who have developed an incredibly deadly strain of the herpes B virus known as MCHV1, which they plan on using as a biological weapon against the human populace of Florida, and swarms of insects who fuse together at the genitals and then burst in a violent acidic explosion after 3 days of non-stop fuck. There are some rumors that these swarms of insects are a curse sent from the base god to punish the people of Florida for their continued existence, but I have my extreme doubts about that. The last confirmed base god curse I recall was in 2015 when he cursed James Harden, and he lifted that curse in 2017, and it's been nothing but blessings for the world ever since. Thank you, base god! My point is, the wildlife of Florida is capable of some very awe-inspiring insanity, and when harnessed can be a very powerful force. Which brings me to the researchers at the University of Florida who were studying alligators in the 1960s. These researchers found that the yolks of alligator eggs contain high amounts of sodium, sugar, potassium, phosphate, and a little bit of citric acid. When this mixture is consumed by people, it helps them perform physically demanding tasks for longer periods of time, and it promotes extreme growth in coral. The Florida researchers went on to sell this mixture commercially, and eventually sold the rights to it to PepsiCo, who still to this day sell it under its original name, Gatorade. Florida is distinct from other states in multiple ways, but possibly the greatest distinction is that Florida is the only state to have its own official-unofficial superhero, Florida Man. Florida Man is not just one person, it is a mantle donned by those of Floridian birth who have the power and the will to commit acts of astonishing heroism, and are also apparently fucking invincible. The original Florida Man was an alcoholic fella named Old Pete, who along with John Henry was one of the original big niggas. Old Pete amazed men and women alike, performing larger-than-life feats which centered around his shockingly thick skull, cracking coconuts with ease for 5 cents a pop, cracking goats with less ease for 50 cents a pop, and his most impressive accomplishment for a whopping $2, which is about $50 when adjusted for inflation, as if you weren't already impressed by that bag securing, was when he stared down a speeding train coming head-on, and he came out the other side, well, not really victorious, but he wasn't dead, so that goes in the W column. Legend has it that shortly after this intense battle with an innocent, unsuspecting train, Old Pete walked into the Gulf of Mexico and transformed into the mythological creature known as a manatee. To this day, Old Pete resurfaces approximately once every decade in order to headbutt Theo Von. In the same vein as Old Pete, the people who inhabit Florida continue to wow outsiders with their strange antics to this very day. Whether it's Florida Man fighting to maintain what makes Florida Florida, or just a standard Florida cracker getting through their day. Whether it's making a rock that doesn't even exist their state gem, or being the place that defines the concept of a swing state. Whether it's a young Harvard dropout trying to make it in the rap game, or a former drug lord now living as a humble family man selling Cuban sandwiches, it may not always be pretty, and it rarely makes sense, but you can't deny that Florida certainly is interesting. Just be careful if you ever do go and visit. You might get mugged in a back alley behind Cinderella's castle by an alligator who's tripping on Flocka. And now I'd like to give a shout out to some of my patrons. Abstract, Atu, Andis, Ben, Citrus L Thrust, Cole, Colin Fire Sr., Cutright, Disco Killa, Magnum, Philippe, Hank, I love it when you call me Smiggy Balls Forever 911, Jack the Yak, Jev Should Have Won, Juice Goose, Maximilian, Michael, Mohammed, Lil Gimp, Nathan J, Nathan K, Rio, Nick, Nick F, Peek Me On Lan, Rain, Real Nibba Hours, Richie, Rodrigo, Samuel, Scott, Informed, Seba S. Bob, Siegfang, Snackawoo, The Holy Spirit, Thomas, William, and Warrior. Thank you, based god! Florida's normal is Canada's never. Time to get paid, blow up like the world trade. Coincidence? I think nut. If you think Florida is bad, just try going to Georgia. Seriously, fuck Georgia. At least Florida has the damn ocean, but in Georgia you just get the fucking hillbillies, crocodiles, hot humid weather, and even get roped into someone else's incest relationship. Seriously, never go to Georgia. It is the true armpit of the US. Florida's just like a sweaty thigh after working out. The hatred for Caucasians is so fucking pathetic. Doctor is big gay. Alright, this guy's message is in fucking Danish or something. I don't speak this, but we'll try it. Vuhuen inganath nu namen vigliz kafugen kathil avel kathil cthulhu kafungene ia rigs. Fuck does that say? Ia rigs ia ia rise and grow ia hydra. Got it. Easy. First try. My New Year's resolution is to start being more punctual. Wait. Florida is the South Schwa of the US.